My dad weighed us every morning and locked women in empty rooms if they gained even half a pound. So I started teaching everyone how to manipulate their weight with old wrestling tricks until he found out and tried to have us all committed to treatment centers. That's when things in our house really spiraled. Every day at 6 a.m. sharp, the women had to step on the scale. If your weight was up by even a fraction, you got locked in the spare bedroom without food until you dropped it again. My mom spent 3 days in there once because she retained water during her period. When she finally came out, her lips were cracked and she could barely stand, but she still smiled and thanked my dad for helping her stay beautiful. I was only 8, and I genuinely thought that was just how the world worked. By the time I was 15, I'd already seen my sister Lily pass out twice, my cousin sneaking sips from the bathroom faucet, and my aunt coaching her daughter on how to purge after Sunday dinners. The man got to eat full meals while we picked at lettuce, counting every bite. The rules were simple. Step on the scale each morning in front of your father or husband. If the number went up, you went to the room. No excuses, no exceptions, unless you were pregnant. But even then, you had 6 weeks after giving birth to return to your marriage weight, or you'd be locked away again. And then something unexpected happened, not pregnancy, but wrestling. It was wrestling season at school, and I had a revelation. I watched the boys drop 5 pounds overnight just to make weight for meets. They dehydrated themselves, then rehydrated after. It was dangerous, but temporary. I became obsessed. I learned how to use caffeine pills as diuretics, how to time water intake down to the hour, how to drop 3 pounds overnight and put it back on by noon without getting caught. But I couldn't keep that knowledge to myself, not when my 12-year-old cousin Ava cried from hunger every day, not when Lily's hair was falling out from starvation. So I started a sewing circle every Thursday afternoon. Officially, we were learning embroidery. In reality, we were sharing strategies. I taught the girls how to use herbal diuretics the night before weigh-ins, how to wake up at 4 a.m. to sweat in trash bags, then shower before the 6 a.m. weigh-in. We used electrolyte packets to rehydrate afterward. We got clinical, tracking our cycles to anticipate water retention, taking measurements to prove we weren't gaining fat, just holding fluid. Some girls got so good they could swing 5 pounds in either direction, eat real meals, and still make weight. It kept us out of the rooms. But I also taught them how to collect proof. I showed them how to photograph the scale readings, how to record the sound of the lock snapping shut, how to hide phones in the punishment rooms. We kept detailed medical logs to show how the dehydration cycles were harming us. 6 months into our circle, it all blew up. I taught them how to manipulate digital scales using magnets, just enough to show 5 pounds lighter. It was working. We'd all been eating again, and our dads were actually complimenting us on our supposed discipline. Then my uncle bought a new scale, old school, mechanical, no electronics to hack. That morning, every woman in the house was 5 pounds over. The men lost it. They thought we'd staged some sort of coordinated uprising. They started dragging girls off to the punishment rooms, but there weren't enough, so they started locking them in closets, the basement, wherever they could. My 13-year-old cousin Mia snapped. She screamed, "We haven't gained weight. We've been faking it. We've been eating this whole time." Then she pulled out her phone and started showing them everything: screenshots, weight logs, tutorial videos on scale manipulation, photos of girls eating full plates with weigh-in results from the next morning. The room froze. My uncle's face went dark red as he flipped through her camera roll. Timestamps, videos, messages. "You poisonous little—" He raised his hand to hit her. But then we heard the sirens. Mia smiled through her tears. "I've been live streaming for the past 10 minutes. The police burst through the front door, radios crackling with codes I didn't recognize. My uncle lowered his arm and stepped back as the officers swept through the house. Out on the porch, one of the officers, a woman with kind eyes, knelt beside Mia, who was still clutching her phone with trembling hands. "Everyone needs to separate into different rooms," the lead officer announced. "We'll be conducting individual interviews." My dad's expression shifted from shock to strategy. He adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and said smoothly, "Officers, this is clearly a misunderstanding. We run a health-conscious household. These girls are being dramatic over basic dietary structure." The other men nodded, quick to follow his lead. My uncle chimed in, "We promote healthy habits, that's all." But the officers weren't buying it. They'd seen the live stream. They'd heard the screaming. Within an hour, Child Protective Services arrived, accompanied by a team of social workers. They set up camp in our living room, turning it into an ad hoc interview center using portable dividers. From the kitchen, I watched as they led my younger cousins away one at a time. Each girl clutched her phone, proof of everything we'd endured. Lily went in pale but composed, and when she came out 40 minutes later, the social worker's expression was stone cold. The fathers gathered in the dining room, their phones glued to their ears, voices low and tense. By that evening, a lawyer showed up, slick suit, leather briefcase, attitude like he was already billing us for just breathing the air. He called a meeting in my dad's study, and we could hear muffled voices behind the closed door. Over the next few days, our house turned into a legal battlefield. The lawyer trained the men on what to say, how to spin things. The locked bedrooms weren't punishment rooms, he coached. They were voluntary reflection spaces, meant for prayer and meditation. The locks? Just for privacy. The girls could leave whenever they wanted, supposedly. My Uncle Darren became their mouthpiece. He started showing up at schools, catching girls from our sewing circle when they were alone. My 14-year-old cousin Emily found a note folded in her backpack. Family stays together. Smart girls know when to keep quiet. He cornered Lily outside her chemistry class. "Your mother's already been sent away," he told her. "She's with relatives who understand the importance of loyalty. Want to join her?" The threat worked on some. 3 girls stopped showing up to school altogether. Their mothers claimed they were too shaken by false allegations to return. But we knew better. Then came the real gut punch. I tried accessing our shared cloud storage. Gone. Months of careful records, photos, audio clips, charts, wiped clean. Erased like none of it ever existed. I knew exactly who had done it. I found my brother Kevin in his room, staring blankly at his laptop. He had always been the tech brain, our fixer, the one who encrypted our group chats and debugged our phones. Now he couldn't even look at me. "Dad made me," he muttered. "He found out about the cloud backup. Said if I didn't delete everything, he'll pull my college funding." Later, the prosecutor called a meeting with the rest of us. She looked exhausted, deep lines cutting across her forehead. "Without Mia's testimony and with the digital evidence gone," she said, "our case is falling apart. The defense is calling this a cultural misunderstanding, strict but loving parenting." That's when I remembered something. Back when I first started teaching the girls, I showed them how to hide old phones inside the punishment rooms, ones that could record audio, capture real-time evidence of what it felt like to be locked in. Some of those phones might still be there. The perfect chance came during my cousin's wedding. Everyone would be at the venue, even Darren. His house would be empty. I told my mom I felt sick and needed to stay home. She barely acknowledged it, too preoccupied with keeping up appearances. Once they left, I drove straight to Darren. My heart hammered the whole way, but the spare key was still under the fake rock on the porch. Inside, I made a beeline for the old punishment room. It had once been a bedroom, but had long since been outfitted with locks on the outside. I pried open the heating vent, exactly where I taught his daughter to stash things. 3 phones, 2 dead, 1 still hanging on at 10% battery. I plugged it into my portable charger and started scrolling. Hours of audio, girls crying, locks clicking, and then gold. Darren's voice, clear and undeniable. I know locking them up is technically kidnapping, but sometimes you have to break small laws to preserve important traditions. These girls need to learn discipline. "What are you doing here?" I froze and spun around.
Behind me stood Daniel, my 17-year-old cousin, my uncle's son, the one being groomed to carry on the enforcement. I froze, clutching the phone, ready to bolt. But Daniel closed the door behind him and leaned against it. "I've been waiting for someone to find those," he said. I stared at him, confused. He pulled out his own phone and showed me a folder labeled insurance. "I'm gay," he said quietly. "I've been hiding it for 3 years. I know what it's like to be trapped by tradition." He'd been recording everything. His father's conversations, the lawyer's coaching sessions, whispered plans to silence the girls, all of it. We spent the next hour transferring files, making backups double and triple secured. His recordings included my uncle admitting to destroying evidence, the lawyer giving explicit instructions on manipulating the system, even the men talking about how to scare us into submission. "Why didn't you come forward before?" I asked. He gave me a look I understood too well. "Same reason you taught the girls how to trick the scales instead of calling the cops. We were all just trying to survive the system until we were ready to take it down." With the new evidence, the trial surged ahead. The defense leaned into their narrative, calling it a cultural misunderstanding, portraying the fathers as strict but loving, just upholding a traditional view of health. They brought in so-called experts to testify about cultural weight norms and family roles. And then something none of us expected happened. My mother asked to testify. She stood in that courtroom, thin and delicate, but steady, and finally told the truth. About the pregnancies where she was locked away for gaining too much weight. About fainting from dehydration and being called dramatic. About watching her daughter suffer the same fate, unable to stop it. Her words cracked something open. One by one, the other aunts came forward. They talked about years of hunger, of isolation for natural changes in their bodies, about being reduced to numbers on a scale. It all came pouring out. The judge didn't hesitate. Systematic abuse, false imprisonment, child endangerment. The sentences ranged from 6 months to 2 years. My uncle, for his threats and manipulation, got the longest. The day after the verdict, my mother filed for divorce. The house became ours. She turned the punishment room into a library. "Words have power," she said. "We're filling this room with better ones." The sewing circle became something more, an official support group. We met every Thursday at the community center. We taught practical skills, we talked, we healed. More girls joined, some from homes like ours, some just needing a place to exist without being judged. I poured myself into school. Without nightly strategies to drop fake weight, my grades climbed. A women's rights organization heard our story and offered me a scholarship to study law. I said yes without hesitation. I knew exactly what kind of lawyer I wanted to be. 6 months later, the letters started coming. My father's handwriting, over and over. Neat envelopes stacked by the mailbox. I never opened them. Instead, I burned each one in the fireplace that had once warmed a home he turned into a cage. The smoke carried away whatever he tried to say. I didn't need it. 2 years later, I was grocery shopping near campus when I saw him. He looked different, smaller, older, time-worn. He walked toward me. His mouth opened, ready to speak. I pulled out my phone and held it up between us. He stopped. Understood. We stood there, former father, former daughter, separated by all he'd done. Then he turned and walked away. Now I work with girls in similar situations. Not as a lawyer yet. I'm still finishing school. But I show up as someone who's been there, someone who gets it. I teach them the same things I once taught my cousins, but with a different ending. Document everything? Yes. Protect yourself? Absolutely. But also, know this. There's a way out. A future that doesn't revolve around scales or locked doors. The sewing circle still meets every Thursday. My mother leads it now. She actually teaches embroidery alongside lessons in self-worth and healing. When I'm home, I stop by. I watch new girls learn to create something beautiful with their hands, while their voices and their lives slowly return to them.
Bodies slowly began to heal after years of punishment. My sister Lily gained 20 pounds and kept it on. She smiles now, really smiles, Not that brittle, stretch thing we all used to wear during morning weigh-ins. My cousins are in therapy. Some still struggle, sure, but all of them now eat when they're hungry, rest when they're tired. They're free. As for me, I'm learning something deeper, that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about prevention, education, and dismantling the systems that let abuse thrive in silence. Every girl I help escape, every family I help understand the difference between health and control, every law student I inspire to take on cases like ours, they're all stitches in a larger tapestry. The scale from our house now sits in the garage, untouched, covered in dust. We thought about tossing it, but in the end, we kept it. Not as a symbol of terror or control, but of what we survived, of what we fought through. A reminder of the morning we finally said, enough. My phone buzzes with a text from Daniel. He's in law school too now. Different campus, same fire. We share case studies, survivor resources, strategies for our future firm. Two cousins, unlikely allies, working toward one goal, a world where no child has to choose between family and freedom. The punishment rooms are gone. In their place, quiet, healing spaces. But the real lessons stayed with us. Not the ones our fathers tried to hammer in about obedience and submission, but the ones we taught ourselves about defiance, resilience, and recovery. Every Thursday, in community centers and converted living rooms across the city, our story keeps growing. One stitch, one girl, one voice reclaimed at a time. Then, one morning, my phone rang, 5:47 a.m. My mom's voice trembled on the other end. "They changed the weigh-in time," she whispered. "Your father just called all the men. They're coming at 6:30 instead." I shot upright, heart thudding. This was exactly the kind of manipulation we feared. Randomizing the weigh-in time, trying to catch us off guard, trying to prove we'd been cheating the system. I sent an emergency alert to the group chat. Within minutes, replies flooded in. Panic. Some girls were mid-hydration routines. Others had eaten late, counting on the usual time to metabolize. My 16-year-old cousin Margie messaged, "Just drank a full glass of water." "Garbage bags," I typed back. "If you need to cut weight, shower now. Turn the water hot. Sweat it out." The house erupted into focused chaos. Bathroom doors slammed. Steam filled the air. I helped Lily wrap her arms and torso in plastic bags under her clothes, then turned the space heater on full blast in her bedroom. We had less than 40 minutes to undo 8 hours of regular human behavior. My mom moved from room to room like a phantom, pale but unshaken. She dropped 2 pounds since the last police visit, stress gnawing at what little was left of her. But this morning, she didn't flinch. She brought towels, checked on each girl, made sure no one passed out. At 6:25, we assembled in the living room, hair damp, faces flushed from heat, but weights on target. The men arrived at 6:30, on the dot. My father walked in first, holding a brand new digital scale. "We've decided that morning weigh-ins need more flexibility," he announced coolly, setting it up on the tile with maddening precision. "Healthy habits shouldn't be predictable. We'll vary the time going forward." My uncle nodded, scanning us like livestock. "And we'll rotate the scales too, for accuracy." One by one, we stepped up. The numbers lit up. Every girl passed. But I caught something unsettling. My father writing in a small notebook. Not just the numbers, but details. Who looked exhausted? Who had damp hair? Who trembled? After they left, we collapsed. Margie was shaking, her lips pale. My sisters had gone slightly blue. We'd won that morning, but just barely. "At what cost?" my mother asked quietly, looking at each of us. And in her eyes, for the first time, was something new. Rage. "They're going to keep changing the rules," she said, "until one of you ends up in the hospital." And she was right. The next 2 weeks were psychological warfare. Weigh-ins came randomly, sometimes twice a day. The scales rotated constantly, each one calibrated slightly differently, some reading high, some low. The fathers made us weigh in wearing different outfits, adding more unpredictability. But it was the school visits that broke us. I was sitting in calculus when the front office called my name over the speaker.
My name came over the loudspeaker during calculus. I was called down to the counselor's office. There, waiting in the plush chair beside the window, was my Uncle Darren, wearing his best suit and his most performative expression of concern. Mrs. Peterson, the school counselor, looked visibly uncomfortable. "Your uncle is worried about your recent behavior," she said gently. "He mentioned you've been saying some troubling things about your family." Darren leaned forward, voice syrupy with faux compassion. "We're just trying to help her, Mrs. Peterson. This rebellion against healthy eating, we're afraid it's gone too far. We believe she may be struggling with an eating disorder, the opposite kind. She's been encouraging the other girls to overeat." I sat frozen. If I spoke up, I'd sound defensive, delusional. If I stayed silent, it was as good as confessing. Mrs. Peterson looked between us, clearly torn. Her instincts told her something was wrong, but Darren was smooth, practiced, persuasive. "We'd like to get her some help," he continued. "There's a facility, quiet, highly regarded. They handle cases like this all the time." The threat wasn't subtle. Comply or be disappeared, like Maya. That afternoon, I found Lily crying in the girls' bathroom. She showed me a note that had been slipped into her locker. "Maya misses her family. Don't make the same mistake." 3 more girls from our sewing circle vanished that week. Not to treatment centers, just pulled from school. Homeschooling, their mothers claimed. But we knew the truth. They were being isolated, severed from every lifeline we'd built. The breaking point came when I learned Brad's betrayal went even deeper than I'd realized. I'd been watching him for weeks, always on his laptop, screen snapping shut the second I entered the room. One evening while he was at basketball practice, I slipped into his bedroom. His laptop was password protected, but Brad had habits. His password was always some variation on the same theme. I cracked it in 2 tries. What I found made me sick. Folders inside folders. Our communications, every text, every group chat message, every guide I'd written on water manipulation, weight tricks, hiding symptoms, all of it, screenshotted, cataloged. And worse, notes, his notes. Detailed analyses of our behavior, predictions, timelines, surveillance logs, all dated after he claimed to have deleted the evidence. He hadn't just erased the files, he'd been spying on us the entire time. The front door creaked open. I shut the laptop just in time. Brad stepped into the room and froze when he saw me at his desk. "How long?" I asked. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Since the beginning. Dad knew you'd try to rebuild everything. He wanted me to stay ahead of it. And you just went along with it?" "You don't understand," Brad said, voice cracking. "He has everything planned. PM'd at his old med school, connections for residency. Everything I've worked for depends on him." "Everything you've worked for," I snapped, "is built on our suffering." Brad sank onto the edge of his bed, face full of shame. "I know," he whispered. "I hate myself for it, but I can't throw it all away." That's when I saw it. An icon on his desktop. A folder labeled insurance. The same word Daniel had used. "You kept copies," I said slowly. "You're playing both sides." Brad went pale. "Get out of my room." But I'd seen enough. My brother, the traitor, was also a coward, hedging his bets. Somewhere on that hard drive was everything we needed, if we could get to it. The next Thursday, only 4 girls came to the sewing circle. The community center echoed with their absence. We sat huddled close, pretending to embroider, but mostly strategizing. "We need another route," Peggy murmured. She was only 11, the youngest.
My mom says we're tearing the family apart. The family was already torn, I said. We're just showing the seams. That's when Margaret, one of the newer girls, spoke up. My neighbor's daughter went through something like this, she said. Not about weight, about control. The key was finding adults outside the family who would listen. We'd tried that, with the police, with CPS. But the father's lawyer had done his job too well. They painted us as confused, misguided. We need another route, Lily said. What about teachers? Someone suggested. The school nurse, I said suddenly. She's a mandatory reporter. If we can get medical proof, dehydration, malnutrition, they have to act. It was risky. The fathers had painted us as drama queens, but labs and vitals couldn't be argued with. So we made a plan. Each girl would visit the nurse separately on different days, report real symptoms, fatigue, dizziness, irregular cycles, all signs of forced weight cycling. We'd build a paper trail they couldn't delete. But the fathers were watching closer than we realized. The next morning, I woke to find my mom sitting on the edge of my bed. Her face was pale, eyes anxious. Your father, he knows about the nurse visits, my mother said softly. Someone told him. He's already called the school. He's pulling you and Lily out. My brain spun. Without school, we'd lose access to the nurse, the counselors, any adult on the outside who might still help. We'd be like the others, cut off, silenced. Mom, I said urgently, you have to stop him. She shook her head. I can't. You know I can't. Yes, you can, I said, more forcefully now. You're our mother. You have rights. She exhaled, but didn't respond at first. I gave those up a long time ago, she whispered, but something in her eyes had changed. The anger I'd seen brewing in her weeks ago had deepened into something more powerful, determination, or maybe desperation. That afternoon, while my father was still at work, my mother did something she had never done before. She drove us to school. If he asks, you snuck out, she said, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. I couldn't stop you. It was a small rebellion, but it was hers. At school, I went straight to the nurse's office. Mrs. Chen looked up from her desk, concern spreading across her face when she saw me. I need help, I said, my voice low, and then I told her everything. She didn't interrupt, just listened, occasionally jotting something down. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. I'll have to file a report, she said eventually. But given the previous CPS involvement, I want to be thorough. Can you bring me medical evidence? Photos? Weight logs? Anything that backs it up? I thought of the phones hidden in Darren's house. Brad's folder labeled insurance. Daniel's recordings. It existed. All of it. But getting to it would be another battle. I'll try, I promised. That evening exploded. My father found out we'd gone to school. He stormed into the house, fury radiating off him like heat. You deliberately defied me, he said, voice cold and flat. My mother sat frozen on the couch, trembling slightly. Both of you, he continued, looking at Lily and me, you went behind my back. We stood our ground, shoulder to shoulder. We went to school, I said. That's not a crime. In this house, he said, my word is law, and you've broken it for the last time. He pointed down the hallway. To your rooms, now. You'll stay there until you remember what obedience means. This wasn't the punishment room. This was house arrest, a new, more personal kind of control. No, my mother said quietly. Everything stopped. My father turned slowly to look at her. Lily and I stared too. She stood, slowly, stepping between us and him. No, she repeated, louder this time. They're going to school. They're going to eat. They're going to live. My father's face cycled through shock, disbelief, fury. You forget your place, he growled. I remember it perfectly. she said, "and I'm done." The silence between them crackled with the weight of decades. Every locked door, every skipped meal, every time she'd smiled through pain. Then he raised his hand, not to strike, but to point, to assert control the way he always had, through threat and domination. Brad moved before any of us. He stepped between them, holding his laptop in both hands. "I have everything," he said quietly. "Every conversation. Every time someone got locked in. Every pound lost. Every threat. Every tear. Every lie." My father froze. "You wouldn't?" he said. "I already did," Brad replied. "Backups on my cloud, on Daniel's cloud, on 3 email accounts. If anything happens to any of us, the whole file goes public." He turned the laptop toward him. Folders on the screen, one after another. Screenshots of the father's texts, their meeting notes, coaching sessions with the lawyer. Even financial records. Money funneled to relatives to hide the girls who were sent away. "You're my son," my father said, voice cracking. "And there's your daughters," Brad shot back. "But you only remembered that when it helped you control them." The room held its breath. Seconds passed, felt like hours. Then my father turned on his heel and walked out. The front door slammed behind him. Moments later, we heard his car start and peel down the street. My mother collapsed onto the couch, her body shaking. Brad set down the laptop and dropped beside her. They both stared into space, processing what had just shattered in that room. "Why now?" I asked him. Brad looked at me, eyes ringed with exhaustion. "Because I realized I was becoming him, and that scared me more than losing med school." For the next few days, the house hovered in a strange sort of limbo. My father didn't come back, but his clothes.
His clothes stayed in the closet, but the morning weigh-ins stopped. For the first time, we ate meals without calculating every bite. We slept without the fear of being pulled from bed for surprise measurements. But not everyone was free. The other families kept up the routines. We heard from cousins still trapped, some worse off than before. My Uncle Darren had tightened his grip, rolling out new restrictions to prevent another rebellion. Then the community center shut us down. They banned our sewing circle, citing family disputes. They didn't want to get involved. David kept sending updates from inside his father's house. Paranoia was high. The men were meeting every night, drafting legal strategies, discussing how to contain the fallout. They'd even hired a PR consultant. "They're going to claim religious persecution," David texted me. "Say their traditional values are under attack." It was clever. Reframe the abuse as culture, paint themselves as victims of modern intolerance. Say we were destroying sacred traditions, not fighting for survival. Mrs. Chen called me back to her office. She had filed the report, but looked uneasy. "The previous CPS case complicates things. They'll probably see this as a family conflict, not abuse, especially with your father's lawyer involved." I thought of Maya, silenced and vanished, of the girls pulled from school, of my mother finally standing up only to face a new war. The system meant to protect us was being played by those who knew its weak points. That's when I heard Margaret's voice in my head again. "You need adults outside the family who will listen." Maybe we'd been thinking too small. What if it's not just our family? What if there are others, other girls, other homes, facing the same thing? Her expression sharpened instantly. That would change everything. Patterns are harder to dismiss. I left her office with a new mission: find the others, build a network, show that this wasn't one family's dysfunction, it was a pattern of systemic abuse dressed up as tradition. I started slow, careful conversations with classmates. anonymous posts in forums, whispered questions to the right people. And the stories came. Not always about weight, but always about control. Girls whose parents used food as punishment or reward. Girls who had to report daily measurements, sometimes not weight, but arm circumference, thigh gaps, waistlines. Punished for growth, for change, for existing. Within 2 weeks, I'd connected with 6 girls from 6 different families. The details varied, but the core was the same. Abuse disguised as concern, control masked as care. We met in secret. No more sewing circles, no more pretense, just truth-telling. A park bench after school, a picnic table after dark, quiet places to speak freely. One girl said her parents withheld dinner if she talked back. Another was forced to drink oil as punishment for gaining a centimeter on her hips. We need to document everything, I told them. Medical records, photos, audio, build cases they can't erase. But as we organized, the backlash grew. One night, Darren came to our house. My mom was alone. I came home to find her in the kitchen, crying, a bruise already darkening her wrist. He said I'm destroying the family, that I'll regret choosing corruption over tradition. I took a photo of her wrist, added it to the file. But I knew now, words weren't the only weapons anymore. The next day, 3 men were waiting by my car after school. Not from our family, others, fathers of the girls I'd been helping. Word had gotten out. You're interfering in private family matters, one said. That needs to stop. I lifted my phone, already recording. Is that a threat? They exchanged a glance, then turned and walked away. But their message was clear. We weren't just facing our abusers anymore. We'd touched something bigger. Our fight had become their threat. Brad came to my room that night, laptop in hand. He said, I've been tracking them. They're organizing too. He showed me screenshots, a group chat of fathers from different households, sharing legal tactics, PR tips, discussing new strategies to regain control. It's real, Brad said. A network, not built on tradition, but on control. He opened another folder. Financial records, he explained. They're pooling money. For lawyers? I asked. For that and something else. He clicked into another document, something called rehabilitation facilities. My stomach turned to ice.
To break rebellion and enforce compliance. We need to move faster, I said. But fast meant risky, and risky meant dangerous. The plan came together over 3 intense, sleepless days. David would gather the last pieces of evidence from inside his father's house during Sunday dinner, when the men would be too distracted with their rituals and power plays to notice. Brad would compile everything, every screenshot, every audio file, every medical document, organized, encrypted, with backups across multiple cloud platforms. The other girls would get their final checkups with the nurse, medical records locked in. And I would go back to my uncle's house for the phones. This time, I wouldn't go alone. Margaret volunteered to come. Her older brother, Theo, came too. He'd broken away from his own controlling family at 18. He knew what it cost. Sunday arrived, gray and drizzling. My mother hugged me at the door, whispering prayers I'd never heard from her before. She'd grown stronger since standing up to my father, but fear still lived behind her eyes. Uncle Darren's house sat quiet under the rain. The fake rock where the key used to hide was empty now. But Theo had learned a thing or two in his years of resisting. The back window, he said, lock's always been weak. Within minutes, we were inside. The punishment room looked smaller now. Maybe because I wasn't a prisoner this time. I was an investigator, seeing it clearly, seeing it as evidence. I went straight for the vent where I'd hidden the phones. Margaret stood watch at the door. Theo recorded everything on his phone for documentation. The screws were tighter than I remembered, painted over. Someone had been here. My stomach sank. But I kept working, chipped at the paint with Theo's pocket knife, worked the screws loose. Finally, the cover came off. The vent was empty. "The phones are gone," I whispered. "Check the other vents," Theo said. "If they found one hiding spot, they might have moved them." We split up, searching every vent, every floorboard, every loose panel. It was Margaret who found something. Not phones, papers. She called us over, and we stared at the file. Documents from a rehabilitation facility in another state. Medical records, treatment plans, diagnoses like oppositional defiance disorder, family disruption syndrome, invented labels meant to pathologize disobedience. Maya's name was on one of the forms. I snapped photos as my hands trembled. This wasn't just control. This was a system, a pipeline built to disappear girls who pushed back. "Someone's coming," Theo hissed from the hall. I froze. Outside, car doors, multiple. We'd been set up. "Back window," I said, shoving the documents back into the vent. "Now!" But when we reached the back of the house, flashlights swept through the rain. We were surrounded. "They knew," Margaret breathed. "Someone told them." My mind spun through our tight circle. David, Brad, Mom, Lily. The front door creaked open. Footsteps. Not hurried, not angry. Confident. "I know you're here," my uncle's voice echoed through the house. "Your cousin David told us everything. Poor boy. Finally realized what loyalty to family really means." My heart cracked. David, who had shared his secrets, who had recorded the lawyer, who understood? Could he have... "He's lying," Theo whispered. "Classic tactic. They're trying to break us from the inside." But the doubt crawled in. How else could they have known? "You have two choices," Darren called out. "Come out now and we handle this privately. Or we call the police. Breaking and entering is a crime. Your choice." Theo looked at me, eyes blazing. "Third option," he whispered. Before I could ask, he pulled out his phone and hit go live. "We're trapped in a house where girls are locked up for gaining weight. They're surrounding us because we tried to collect evidence of abuse. This is happening right now." Instant. Effective. My uncle's voice faltered. Footsteps rushed our way, but Theo didn't stop filming. "3 teenagers trying to expose family abuse, and look how many grown men it takes to shut us down." Flashlight beams swept through the windows. The back door burst open. My uncle stood there, face twisted with rage. Behind him, other men, from other families. But behind them, neighbors, lights on, front doors open. People stepping out into the rain, drawn by the noise, by the shouts. "Turn that off," Darren barked. "No," Theo said calmly, holding the camera steady. "Let them see. Let everyone see what protecting family honor really looks like." For one moment, everything stopped. And then, sirens. First distant, then closer. Multiple vehicles. Someone had called 911, maybe a neighbor, maybe someone watching the stream. My uncle's face contorted, cycling through. The calculations played out behind my uncle's eyes. Neighbors watching, the live stream still rolling, sirens drawing closer. His carefully maintained facade was collapsing, and everyone could see it. "This isn't over." he finally muttered, stepping aside. We walked past him, Theo still holding his phone steady. Margaret gripped my hand tightly as we passed the gathered men. Some looked furious, others uneasy, a few unsure. The tide was shifting, neighbors filming with their own phones, capturing it all. The police pulled up just as we stepped into the street, not to arrest us, but responding to reports from concerned viewers about child endangerment. The tables had turned, but I knew this was just one skirmish in a longer war. As we gave our statements, I saw David approaching with his mom. His face was drawn, tear-streaked. He shook his head, mouthing, "I didn't tell." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But in families like ours, trust wasn't just fragile, it was flammable. The investigation that followed was nothing like the first. Theo's live stream had gone viral, shared, reposted, stitched across platforms. Suddenly, we weren't just names in a file. We were real, visible. And we weren't alone. Other girls started speaking up. Other families, other stories. My mom filed for divorce the next week, not quietly, publicly, citing decades of coercion, emotional manipulation, and abuse. She wasn't the only one. Other mothers followed, a cascade of separation, of choosing children over control, of tearing the old system down. But the fathers regrouped. The rehabilitation facilities were still running. Girls were still disappearing. The structure had been exposed, but not dismantled. Brad handed over all his evidence, every file, every folder, to the prosecutors. His path to medical school was gone. Our father had pulled all support. But Brad looked lighter, like a man freed from the prison of his own guilt. "I'm switching to social work. Maybe I can help kids stuck like we were." The sewing circle came back, but not as a cover anymore. We met openly now at the library. We taught each other life skills, shared coping tools, and created a sanctuary for anyone trying to escape family control. Some days were harder than others. Our father contested the divorce, using every tactic in the book. My uncle spread lies about us, calling us traitors, manipulators. Some of our extended family turned their backs. But we kept going. Each girl who joined was another voice. Each mother who chose to stand up was another fracture in the foundation of generational abuse. Maya never came back, but through whispers and connections, we heard she was still out there, placed with relatives who upheld the same values, still trapped, still resisting. She sent word through someone we barely knew. Still fighting, still surviving. Don't stop. So we didn't. The investigation spread. More families, more exposure. The so-called treatment centers came under scrutiny. Slowly, painfully, the machine began to grind down. But the biggest shift was inside us. We learned our bodies belonged to us. Our choices were ours to make. Our voices, once silenced by scales and locked doors, now had power. The war wasn't over. It may never truly be. But every Thursday, in libraries and homes, in anonymous chat rooms and back rooms of community centers, we gathered. We stitched new lives from the shredded remnants of our old ones. And late at night, sometimes I'd get texts from numbers I didn't recognize. "I saw your story. I need help." And I always answered. Because that's what we do. We reach back and pull others forward, one voice at a time, until the chorus becomes too loud to ignore. Back on the street, the police took our statements. Neighbors continued filming from their porches. My uncle stood stiff and seething as officers questioned him about the locks, the punishments, the secrecy. Theo's stream had already reached thousands. More squad cars pulled up, responding to the calls flooding in. David found me while the officers were preoccupied. His hands trembled as he held his phone. On it, text messages from his father. Threats. If he didn't reveal our plan, his father would out him. The timestamp showed the texts were sent barely an hour before we'd entered the house. I deleted them from the group chat, told them I changed my mind, but someone was already watching the house. I wanted to be angry, but I understood. We'd all made impossible choices trying to survive in families built on manipulation and fear. David hadn't betrayed us. He'd protected us the only way he could, by buying time, creating misdirection. The officers eventually separated us for individual questioning. A female officer took me aside. Her pen was ready, her tone serious. She asked me to walk her through everything: the punishment rooms, the scales, the forced weight cycles. She didn't flinch, didn't dismiss. She asked the kind of questions that mattered.
Dates, times, witnesses. This wasn't like the first time. They were building a real case now. Theo had to surrender his phone to the authorities, but not before the live stream had already been saved and distributed across multiple platforms. Within hours, other girls from other cities started coming forward. Stories emerged. The hashtag Scales and Locks began trending. My mom arrived at the scene after a flurry of frantic phone calls from relatives. She didn't even glance at my uncle as she passed him, just walked straight to me and wrapped me in the kind of hug that made my knees buckle. Behind her, Brad pulled up, laptop bag over one shoulder. He jogged over, breathless. "I've been monitoring their group chat," he said, his voice low. "They're planning to press charges, breaking and entering. But I have screenshots from months ago, them talking about the punishment rooms, admitting everything." The police released us after 2 hours of questioning, but before we left, they served my uncle with a warrant to search the house. We stood across the street and watched officers move through the building. They documented the exterior locks on bedroom doors, photographed the converted punishment room, and retrieved the papers Margaret and I had stashed back into the vent. That night, our house felt strange. My father still hadn't returned, but his shadow lingered in every corner. My mother moved through the rooms like she was reclaiming a battlefield, opening windows, rearranging furniture, and finally throwing out the scale, the one that had ruled our lives for so long. The next morning, the dominoes began to fall. 3 more families came forward after seeing Theo's live stream. The rehabilitation facility mentioned in the documents faced a surprise inspection. My father's lawyer fired back with a cease and desist letter, accusing us of defamation, trying to shut down the momentum. But it was too late. We had it now. Mrs. Chen started reaching out. She contacted nurses at other schools. Together, they pulled medical records, hard evidence of chronic dehydration, stunted growth, irregular vitals, all tied to specific families. The pattern was real. Brad spent the following days building a master archive. Every screenshot, every video, every audio file and medical document. He laid it out in a timeline, organized, backed up, encrypted. He distributed copies to our trusted circle: David, Theo, Margaret, and 2 journalists who'd reached out when the stream went viral. If they came for the evidence again, it would survive. But the fathers responded with precision. They hired a PR firm which rolled out a campaign painting us as rebellious children brainwashed by social media. They brought in hand-picked doctors who spoke vaguely about the dangers of obesity, the importance of discipline, and parental rights. My uncle went on a morning show, all charm and poise, claiming to be a misunderstood parent whose daughter had fallen victim to dangerous internet movements promoting self-destruction. He spoke of tradition, of family, of faith. He warned of government intrusion and moral decay. But for every TV appearance they staged, another survivor stepped forward. A woman in her 30s posted photos from her teenage years, hollow cheeks, thinning hair, bruises she used to conceal with sleeves. She told her story. She had escaped at 18 and still couldn't eat normally 2 decades later. The investigation deepened when Mia's aunt contacted police. She'd been caring for Mia in another state and had only just learned the truth about why she was sent there. Horrified, she drove Mia back herself, despite threats from the family. Mia looked smaller than I remembered, frail. Her voice barely carried as she testified, locked in the punishment room for days at a time. She showed the investigators photos she had taken, claw marks on the wall, a bucket in the corner, a high, unreachable window. The prosecutor's case was strong, but they warned us the defense would come at us hard. The fathers were wealthy, connected. Several judges had already recused themselves due to family or social ties to the accused. In the meantime, our support group flourished. We met twice a week now, no more pretending, no more hiding. Some mothers brought their daughters quietly, still living under their husband's control, but needing something real, a lifeline, a whisper of hope. One night, a woman showed up late, eyes darting, 3 daughters in tow. She looked around the room like she expected to be dragged back out. "My husband doesn't know we're here," she said, "but I saw the stream. We need help." Her oldest, maybe 14, lifted her sleeve without a word. Dark bruises, fingertip-shaped.
And dragged to their punishment room. The youngest, barely 10, hadn't spoken since her last confinement. We acted fast. Connected them with resources, lawyers working pro bono, safe houses for women and children escaping abusive homes, trauma-informed therapists who understood what it meant to live under systematic control. The network had grown far beyond what I imagined back when I first taught my cousins to manipulate the scale. As the trial date loomed, the intimidation attempts ramped up. Dead animals appeared on our doorstep. Our car tires were slashed twice. After someone spray-painted liars across the garage, Brad installed security cameras. But it wasn't all fear. Support poured in from unexpected places. A group of male survivors reached out. They shared stories of being held to impossible physical standards by fathers who demanded obedience in the name of strength and discipline. They knew what it was like to crave love that always came with conditions. Theo started a companion support group for young men trying to break free. He partnered with David, who had finally come out to his mother and, to everyone's surprise, found acceptance. Together, they build resources for LGBTQ+ youth trapped in households like ours. The week before trial, my father reappeared. Not in person, through his lawyer. He wanted reconciliation, to work things out as a family. His lawyer warned us, criminal proceedings would permanently fracture the household. My mother read the letter aloud, then laughed. A low, bitter sound. She'd gained 15 pounds since he left, and she looked healthier than I'd seen her in years. He tore this family apart the first time he locked me in that room, she said, then calmly fed the letter into the fireplace. Then came the break in the case. Security footage from a grocery store near my uncle's house surfaced. It showed the 3 of us, me, Theo, and Margaret, arriving at the house. But more importantly, it showed my uncle and 5 other men arriving 20 minutes earlier. They'd been lying in wait. The prosecutor added conspiracy charges. The footage proved it wasn't a misunderstanding or a case of trespassing. It was a setup. The defense argued it was coincidence, that the men had merely come to check on the property. But Brad had the messages, texts exchanged 2 days earlier discussing how to catch us red-handed and make sure they never pull this again. 2 days before trial, Peggy's mother reached out. My youngest cousin had been hospitalized, severe dehydration. Her father had tightened restrictions. She was 11 and weighed less than she had at age 9. Her mother was ready to testify. The first day of trial, the courtroom overflowed. Supporters filled one side. The father's allies filled the other. News cameras lined the back wall, granted limited access by the judge due to high public interest. My mother testified first. Her voice was steady. She described years, decades of emotional and physical abuse framed as health care. She provided hospital records labeled exhaustion, which were actually starvation. Photos of her emaciated frame after voluntary reflection periods. Maya followed, stronger now, supported by her aunt. She calmly told the court about being transported across state lines, about threats, about the isolation of the punishment room, about surviving what no child should ever have to survive. Her words were unembellished, chillingly factual, just the truth. When the defense cross-examined, they tried to spin it. They painted us as rebellious girls seduced by body positivity extremism, claimed we'd turned normal discipline into conspiracy. They brought in their experts, psychologists, nutritionists, who testified about reasonable parental authority. But then the recordings played. Voices filled the courtroom. My uncle, I know locking them up is illegal, but it's necessary. Another man, if CPS comes sniffing around, we rotate the girls, move them out fast. The security footage from the grocery store was enhanced, audio extracted. My uncle's voice, clear as day. When we catch them inside, we make sure they never interfere again. There was no misinterpretation. This was conspiracy, organized, intentional. Brad took the stand. He spoke about the pressure to stay quiet, about the emails from our father threatening his future if he didn't comply, about the moment he realized silence was complicity. He handed over everything. A detailed, time-stamped record of obstruction, of evidence tampering, of threats meant to silence us all. In a final attempt to twist the narrative, the defense brought in cultural anthropologists. They testified about global parenting customs, weight management practices, community-enforced health ideals around food and family structure. But the prosecutor countered with experts on abuse, people who understood how control works regardless of culture. They explained how mechanisms of coercion, shame, and dominance show up in every society, that no tradition excuses torment. And then, on the final day of testimony, something none of us saw coming. One of the fathers broke ranks. During a short recess, Peggy's father stood and asked to speak privately with the prosecutor. His daughter's hospitalization had cracked something open in him. Guilt, maybe, or fear, or clarity. He offered to testify in exchange for a plea deal. And when he took the stand, the truth came pouring out. He laid bare the network, how families across 3 states had coordinated routines and punishments, how they'd shared strategies for avoiding detection, how they'd pooled money to fund legal defense, public relations, and yes, those so-called rehabilitation facilities. He named names, gave dates, described the facilities for what they really were, conversion camps, designed to erase resistance through starvation, isolation, and psychological torment. The courtroom was silent when he finished. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. We waited in a small room, hands clasped, barely breathing. When the door opened and they called us back in, the air felt electric. The jury foreman stood, verdict in hand. Guilty. On all counts. Conspiracy to commit false imprisonment, child endangerment, witness tampering, obstruction of justice. The sentences would come later, but the convictions were final. The room erupted. Some families cried with relief, others shouted in outrage, still clinging to the lie that abuse had been love all along. The fathers were taken into custody immediately, no bail, too high a flight risk now. My uncle's face as they handcuffed him was something I'll never forget. Rage, confusion, disbelief that his power was truly, finally gone. Outside the courthouse, the media waited. Theo spoke first, calm, focused, his words steady as he urged the public to believe survivors, to listen, to act. My mother stepped to the microphones after him. "I'm ready to heal," she said simply. Maya's aunt followed, announcing plans to launch a foundation to help other girls in situations like Maya's, a place where no one would be told they were imagining their pain. The sentencing came 2 months later. The judge had reviewed everything, the evidence, the testimonies, the years of silent suffering. She spoke directly about the cruelty of it all, the way these men weaponized food, twisted care into control, shattered children under the guise of love. Darren, my uncle, received 8 years. My father got 6. The others were sentenced from 3 to 7, depending on their involvement and cooperation. The facilities were permanently shut down. Their operators were charged separately. It wasn't everything we had hoped for, but it was something. It was justice, it was accountability, and it was a beginning.